I'd like to turn this over to Carl Herzog, who is a biologist here at DEC, and he's been very involved with the unfortunate outbreak of a new disease, a new wildlife disease, first identified in New York State, and has been it's been identified the causative agent identified is a non-native fungus, a fungus that's native to Europe and is cold-loving. And Carl is joined by many other biologists and professionals who are just racing time to try to save our bats. So I will hand this over to Carl. And again, please put your mute buttons on if you're not speaking.
Okay, so originally described as Whitenose syndrome because when the problem first showed up here in New York, it was really just described as a collection of symptoms, and the most obvious one being you can see clearly on the bat on the right. That's a little brown bat with the classic fungal presentation of the white bloom around the muzzle. It also shows some fungal growth on the wings and the ears, and pretty much any exposed skin, non-furred skin, is subject to the fungal growth. The other symptom that was very obvious, immediately really, was bats leaving their hibernation sites in the middle of wintertime to fly out on a snow-covered landscape in the middle of winter, something that does not happen normally. Many bats died, as I'm sure everyone knows. The primary proximate cause is starvation due to depleted fat reserves. Although some bats, of course, many of the ones that fly out in the wintertime get eaten by predators, and et cetera. There's also another issue that we eventually discovered, and that there's a tendency for wing damage, the tissue necrosis actually that takes place. This is a pretty mild case that shows some scarring, those light-colored patches, and then a few actual puncture kind of holes. This is a partially healing wing. In a more severe case, you can see large segments of the wing membrane eroded away, and obviously this has the potential to impair the bat's ability to feed itself and live a normal kind of a life. So a little background: pre-Whitenose in New York, we have about over 120 caves and mines that have been surveyed as bat hibernation sites. New York is not particularly well endowed in the number of sites as some other states are, and I'll show you later. Prior to the arrival of Whitenose, we had done routine surveys over the years that totaled roughly 500,000 bats of 6 different species that hibernate here. All of them were doing well. One issue, though, obvious risk factor: 75% of those 500,000 bats were located in just 5 sites. And actually, if you took the top 10 sites, that would total 90% of the counted bats that we know of. And obviously, this is exactly the wrong, what you'd rather not have when faced with a communicable disease, having so many bats, so many animals congregating together in so relatively few places. Nonetheless, that's the reality in New York. So jump back to 2007. In the winter of 2007, we started getting reports of large numbers of bats seen flying around out in the area. So this is the area just west of Albany here in upstate New York. Bats found on the winter landscape, flying around and dead. We had no idea what was causing this until we did a part of a routine survey of a cave just west of Albany. at which time we discovered thousands of dead bats, and half of the survivors had this unusual white growth on their noses. And this is the picture that was taken on that day, and it was immediately shared with all across North America with bat researchers. And undoubtedly, you've seen this picture. If you've seen anything, it's been published in numerous different outlets. They give you a little bit bigger perspective. This is the map of New York State and adjacent western New England and Pennsylvania, and it shows the 5 sites that were originally identified to have this problem in 2007. All of them clustered, in a small area, 15 kilometers radius in Albany and Schoharie counties here in upstate New York. And some of the other surveys that were done that year are shown on this map with the other colored green dots. And I put those out to show you that the observed progression of the spread of the problem in its invasive nature, I guess. Jump down to 2008, and you can see a lot more activity going on in terms of surveying, and also a huge increase in the number of sites that had obvious infections, as far as 200 kilometers away from the original location. This was, I think it kind of goes without saying, but it was a shocking situation to see that this thing spread so far, so fast. Pull back again to get an even wider view, and you can see some of the survey effort that was done in other states, again showing the somewhat limited distribution at this point, but to convey the obvious spreading nature of the problem as it was apparent to us at the time. So now we're going to jump to 2009, and we took a different presentation. Instead of looking at every individual site, this just shows counties that included at least one affected site. So the area in New York and New England is not much different from the last presentation, but now we've included Pennsylvania and all the way as far south as Virginia and West Virginia. Over 65 total individual hibernation sites, and undoubtedly more that were not known about at the time. So now this is the latest map that's been prepared this year. It includes positive confirmations in Indiana, North Carolina, Tennessee. In addition to the states previously, also I guess there's one county in Maryland, and there's some stuff in Delaware too. The sites highlighted in Missouri and Oklahoma are not considered to be actually confirmed cases of the problem. Those represent detections of the fungus itself that was found on bats, but that the bats did not display the histological characteristics of a full infection. But so probably, this represents our increased ability to the sensitivity that we have now to detect it. So they're using molecular DNA-based techniques to be able to identify the fungus, which we didn't have back in the earlier years of this situation. And so now the definition of a confirmed case is based on histopathology on the animals themselves, as opposed to merely just observing the symptoms, which, as I described earlier. The net result isn't a whole lot different, no matter how you look at it, though. So this is a microphotograph, scanning electron microscope, that shows the fungus and that kind of cylindrical-looking structure.
Right today about the tub refinishing?
That's actually an individual bat hair, and the distinctive kidney-shaped spores there, the conidia of this fungus, are pretty unusual and rather diagnostic of the fungus. Kochs postulates refers to 19th century microbiologist, Nobel Prize winning guy who postulated how to decide when a pathogen is the cause of the disease. And essentially these postulates have been satisfied for the fungus as being the cause of the problem. It's entirely possible that there are other complicating issues, but it's pretty certain that what we have here is a fungal disease. And in fact, we should stop really calling it Whitenose syndrome and call it Whitenose disease, or as one mycologist told me, the proper way to describe it would be Geomycosis, which refers to the Geomyces genus that this fungus falls into. It's kind of hard to get people to stop saying Whitenose syndrome, though, so that may be with us forever. One telling experiment that was done in the winter of 2010 that impinges on things greatly is an effort that we participated in. We actually went out to Wisconsin, which at the time was pretty far outside the affected area. Removed some bats in the fall, I think it was approximately late November. Put them in coolers and actually drove them back east and put them into 2 hibernation sites in Vermont from which the bats had been wiped out. So these are clean animals that had not been exposed to the problem before. They were brought in these coolers and put into these 2 separate mines in Vermont that had previously been host to wintering animals, but that all the animals had essentially been died off, and the few that were left were moved to another section of the hibernation site. And then the newly brought in bats were screened off to prevent them from leaving, and also to prevent local bats from mixing in with them. The bats from Wisconsin started to show symptoms within 10 weeks of being moved, and they were virtually all dead by the end of the winter. So the important implication of that is that the site itself retains the ability, apparently, to cause infections on animals that have previously not been exposed to the problem. And that has some pretty major implications as far as the ability to come up with any kind of effective treatment for this problem. Even if a treatment of individual animals could be developed, it undoubtedly would have to be repeated for some period of time because the hibernation sites themselves apparently can act as a reservoir for infection. So on to some of the numbers of bats have been dying in extremely high numbers, as many of you I'm sure have heard. So these are the 3 most heavily affected species that we have here in New York, and these are generally throughout the northeastern states. The leftmost picture is what's now known as the tricolored bat. It used to be called the eastern pipistrelle. The rightmost picture is the little brown bat, which used to be the most common bat that we had here in New York by far. Of those 500,000 bats that I mentioned, 85% of them were little brown bats. Super common animal. And then the one in the center towards the bottom there is the northern bat. It used to be called northern long-eared bat. And that one is clearly the species that's been affected the most, and literally something like 98% of the ones that we know of in New York are missing and presumed dead. The other numbers around approximately 90%. I should say all these numbers are based on data from New York, although combining data from the affected New England states and now Pennsylvania, which has had the problem for a couple of years now, wouldn't really change these numbers very much. They're seeing the same kinds of numbers. Yeah, 85. Those are the decline, the number of animals that have been lost out of as best we can tell. The Indiana bat, which is the only of the 6 species, the only one that has endangered species protection at present, has suffered somewhat less. It's hard to consider 60% decline lower, but that's what it seems to be. Although that I would say that number is continuing to go down. The eastern small-footed bat is clearly affected less than the others, although the numbers on these are not nearly as clear. Our confidence in our ability to count this bat in the wintertime is not good. They tend to hide a lot in cracks and crevices, and they're not out in the open where you can normally see them, as is depicted in this picture. Clearly, we have found examples such as this animal with the fungus growing on them, so it's obvious that it's affected them to some extent. But the suggestion is that hopefully not in the same category as some of the other species. And then the last species of the 6 is the big brown bat, which is now the most common species. As far as we can tell, though, and we had to look hard to find a picture that shows any fungus growing on this bat. This is one of the few that we have. Clearly not affected very much at all on a population level. Most of these bats, however, we don't encounter them underground very often, and it's thought that most of them spend the winter actually living in human structures. So, which doesn't take too much imagination to conclude that might have some protective, that behavior might have some protective benefit for the bats. This bat is much more cold tolerant and also tolerant of wider temperature ranges during the hibernation period than other bats, and that's part of the reason, probably a big part of the reason why they've adapted so well to living in people's attics and other places in human structures. We're starting now to get some corroborating summer information. So this is a multi-year examination of the catch per unit on NISNet efforts that have been done in New York State in recent years. Most of these are done for doing environmental review for various kinds of projects. So they're not intended to show animal abundance, but nonetheless, the trends that we've seen corroborate strongly the data that we're getting from the winter surveys, at least for the little brown bat, which is referred here as lascivigus, and septentrionalis, the northern bat. So the catch per unit effort has declined something like 90% for little browns and 99% or so for northern, so pretty much exactly what we see in the wintertime. Eptesicus is the big brown bat that I just mentioned, and no obvious trend and change in the trend with that species, and it's pretty clear they're still quite abundant. One interesting situation that we're running into, so this is a shot from the inside of Hales Cave, which was one of the original 5 sites that I mentioned, and we have Hales Cave is dominated by little brown bats, so this graph shows the count of little brown bats only at that site. And the steep decline, so 16,000 or so prior to the arrival of Whitenose, dropped rapidly to around 1,000 or so in a couple of years, and has essentially, well, actually, it might possibly suggest it might be getting a slight increase in the most recent years. Now, this is way too early to conclude that this is the bottom of the decline, even at this site. One of the well-known symptoms of the problem is that bats roost in different areas than they used to before the fungus affected them, and natural caves all have hidden areas where we can't get to and count the bats. So this could reflect changes in the roosting behavior or some other aspect of the thing. It'll take several years more of examination before we can conclude that the decline has bottomed out. And lest you jump to the hopeful conclusion that some 10% of the animals that are out there might be resistant to this problem, I'm going to point you to what used to be our largest site, an abandoned graphite mine up in the Adirondacks near Hague, which used to have, this was the largest documented winter site for little brown bats anywhere, over 180,000 in this one abandoned mine. And the last best count we have for this site was at the end of 2010, when that number had dropped to a mere 2,000. So some 99% decline at that site. This is typical of what we've seen. There's variation in the impact from site to site, and also, as I mentioned, between species in somewhat inconsistent ways. So the hope that there is some number of animals out there that are somehow resistant to the problem, whether it be some inherent immune system response, or perhaps some behavioral variation that might be selected for by this obvious selective pressure. It's really just too early to make those kind of conclusions. In terms of the spread of the problem in New York, this is a close-up of the map I had shown previously that shows the affected counties. This is about as filled in as the map is ever going to get for New York. Hibernation sites are not uniformly distributed across the state, and essentially we've just stopped looking for new places where it might exist. Some approximately 50% of the known sites in New York are known to be infected right now, and all of the larger ones. We really don't see any advantage in even visiting any of the others. So, and even if we did, it would only add, I think, 2 more counties to this map. So, essentially, our conclusion is that the fungus is virtually everywhere in the state. Realistically, at least 3 species have to be considered to be at risk for extirpation, at least from the Northeast, due to this problem, and particularly the northern bat. We have a hard time even finding any of those during winter surveys these days. But each of these 3 species is clearly at risk. As I mentioned, the decline on Indiana bats, and this is a typical cluster, by the way, of what Indiana bats look like. They're extremely social animals. They cram together very tightly. This is something like 300 or 400 bats per square foot density. But the decline has been slower than it was for little browns, and evidence is that it's continuing. Small-footed bat, as I mentioned, situation isn't quite clear. I mean, it's pretty certain that there's been a decline, but the actual magnitude of it is not so clear. And as I mentioned, big brown bats, although the number that we observe underground has declined, they're still clearly abundant, and it's very no noticeable change at a population level. There are 3 other species of bats that are common to northeastern North America: hoary bat, silver hair, and the red bat. These bats don't hibernate here, but actually fly south for the winter. They're migratory, and they don't, because they don't show up in hibernation sites very often, and only the silver hair really is ever recorded with any regularity of using underground locations. It's hoped that these bats species should remain safe from the problem, although they are the least poorly studied bats, perhaps even the least poorly studied vertebrates in North America, and it's really difficult to say, you know, if they were affected, how we would even recognize it. Many different people working on trying to understand this problem and come up with what to do about it. Federal and state agencies, a number of universities, lots of nonprofit organizations, a really talented bunch of people putting a lot of effort into trying to figure out what's going on here. So I want to talk a little bit more about the invasive nature of the problem and is more appropriate for this audience. So we're quite certain that this disease is new to North America. This picture, as I said, was shared widely across amongst the bat research community, and no one in North America has reported ever seeing anything like this prior to 2006. It took a while, but we did eventually track down some photos of similarly affected bats, at least in terms of fungal growth, from Europe. And the comparisons, genetic comparisons of the fungus have been made, although that, you know, there never seems to be any end to the degree of how close you can look at that question. And the North American genome has been completely sequenced at this point, and I think the European one may have by now also. But by all accounts, and I'm not a microbiologist, we're told the fungus is virtually identical to what we have here in North America. So similar as to at least support the notion that what we have is an invasive transport of the fungus by some mechanism here to North America. Perhaps from Europe, although I would hasten to add that no one has really looked in other areas of the world. Undoubtedly, if it's in Europe, it's probably in Asia, and it's possible that, you know, the source is not European but from somewhere else. But that's the information that's available at the moment. They've since put some effort into looking around Europe to find this fungus, and the reason that this is new work is because there's no associated mortality in the European bats with this fungus, which, well, there's, I suppose, a number of possible explanations, but it at least suggests the possibility that you know, the fungus and the bats kind of co-evolved in that environment, and they have some ways to deal with the issues that our North American bats don't have. That photo on the the bottom is another scanning electron microscope of the European fungus, and if you remember back to what the other one looked like, it's quite similar. It's been found in at least 5 species, and this particular publication, Wibble, found it in 3 countries in Central Europe. It's since been found in a number of others as well, and it's apparently fairly widespread, although not extremely common to find the obvious fungal growth on the bats in Europe. So the obvious question, especially obvious to folks in this group, is, how did this thing get here? This is a picture of one of our biologists actually doing one of the winter surveys to count bats in a natural cave near Syracuse. But you can see the potential possibility for getting exposed to environmental fungus or any other microbe for that matter, any pathogens that might be present in an environment. This has led some people to jump to the conclusion that the recreational cavers could easily be responsible for transporting the fungus here from Europe or some other place. This is a well-traveled group of people. Some of them go all over the world caving for various different reasons, and it's certainly a possibility that that's a mechanism about how it may have been transmitted to New York. Although I would looking at this map that shows cave areas in eastern U.S., you can see quite a few more caves than we have in upstate New York can be found in places like Virginia and West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. I mean, this is where the order of magnitude more caving activity takes place, if not multiple more orders of magnitude more. The odds of it showing up in New York don't seem all that good, but nonetheless, it's here, and that can't be denied. Another possibility is Howe Cave is a commercial show cave, which is located literally at the epicenter. In fact, the first documented evidence that we have of Whitenose in North America is from a portion of this cave, not the portion that people normally go to when they go on the tours there. But we have photographs from 2006 of bats that clearly have the fungus growing on them then. And given that some 150,000 people a year from all over the world visit this cave, it used to host about 1,000 bats or so, even though most of the people who visit the site don't really go in the area where the bats are found. But the fact that it's the oldest recorded evidence and it is located right at the epicenter of the problem can't be completely ignored. Another possible explanation, which hasn't received very much attention at all, is the possibility of accidental, or I suppose even intentional, importation of a live bat. There have been numerous examples of transoceanic distances being covered by live bats carried in shipping containers, cargo ships, passenger and cargo aircraft. This has been known for at least the past 30 years. And bats are very social animals. The European species are different than what we have here in North America, but it's entirely believable that if one was brought here, that it might seek winter refuge with other bats here in North America. In order to try to prevent the spread of the problem throughout North America, there have been cave closures by a number of different authorities. A lot of federal properties have been closed, and as well as properties on private land. This has raised the ire of the recreational caving community to to some degree. One contributing factor to that is the fact that there has been no similar closure of the commercial show caves, even those on federal property, such as Mammoth Cave here down in Kentucky. There's the Fish and Wildlife Service's position is that all recreational caving should be terminated until such time as we can, find out what to do about this. Or actually, there is no real suggested end to the problem. And so compliance with that voluntary moratorium has probably, there's a lot of evidence that it hasn't been good. And it's been well known in the past that the only way to really keep people outside of these sites is to use physical barriers to do so. The recreational caving community, it encompasses a very varying slice of the population and includes a lot of people, many of whom are not amenable to the idea of wildlife conservation per se. This picture here shows a gate that was intended to keep people out of an old mine that's actually located in New York, in a state park in New York down near the New Jersey border. And then the picture on the right shows that same gate defeated by folks who wanted to go into the site for recreational purposes. It's been broken into a number of times. It can be quite a challenge to keep people out of these sites. The other mechanism to try to prevent the spread that the agencies have been encouraging is the disinfection of clothing and gear that's been used in infected sites or potentially infected sites prior to then using the same gear elsewhere. So typically this involves soaking in quaternary ammonium compound or some household bleach solution to have been demonstrated to kill the fungus pretty readily. It puts a lot of wear and tear on the clothing and other gear that the cavers use, and again, it's not clear, what kind of compliance that we're getting on this front either. Some people certainly are doing their part to try to keep from spreading the stuff, but there's a large kind of an outlaw sort of a wing to the caving community, and many of them are people who are not amenable to taking advice such as this. So I think I'll just leave it at that and ask if folks have any questions if we have enough time.